Let's explore the diverse annual earnings of leaders across the globe. In Iran, the supreme leader earns $0, similar to the sovereign of Vatican City, who also receives $0. Moving to Cuba, the president earns $360 annually. In Laos, the president takes home $1,630. The prime minister of São Tomé and Príncipe earns $2,100, while the prime minister of Ethiopia makes $3,600. The interim prime minister of Haiti earns $3,782, and the president of Eritrea earns $6,000. In Guinea-Bissau, the president receives $6,306, and the prime minister of Moldova earns $6,433. The president of Sri Lanka earns $7,380, while the prime minister of Nepal makes $9,033. The president of Djibouti has a salary of $10,000, and in Turkmenistan, the president earns $10,800. The general secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam receives $11,103, while the president of Kiribati earns $11,158. In Mongolia, the prime minister makes $11,390, and the president of Ukraine takes home $11,600. The president of Sierra Leone earns $12,220, and the president of Tajikistan has an annual salary of $13,200. The prime minister of Pakistan earns $13,553, while in Serbia, the prime minister makes $13,736. The president of Senegal receives $15,210, and the president of Yemen earns $15,300. The prime minister of Montenegro makes $15,522. And the president of Uzbekistan receives $15,600. The prime minister of North Macedonia earns the same, $15,600, while in Bangladesh, the prime minister's salary is $16,400. The president of Chad earns $16,604, and the president of Tunisia makes $16,700. Moving to the Solomon Islands, the prime minister earns $18,181, while the president of Kyrgyzstan takes home $18,800. The prime minister of Tuvalu earns $19,808, and the prime minister of Cape Verde makes $20,308. In Kazakhstan, the president earns $20,400, while the president of Angola makes $21,054. The president of Dominica earns $21,666, and in China, the president receives $22,000. The interim president of Guinea earns $22,309, while the president of Seychelles makes $23,700. The prime minister of Albania earns $24,980, and in East Timor, the prime minister takes home $27,000. The chairman of the Transitional Sovereignty Council of Sudan earns $29,320, while the prime minister of Armenia makes $29,720. The president of Benin earns $29,810, and the prime minister of Grenada receives $29,859. In Cambodia, the prime minister earns $30,000, while the president of Micronesia takes home $32,000. The prime minister of Vanuatu makes $32,295, and in Niger, the president earns $33,390. The president of Belarus has a salary of $33,600, while the president of Burkina Faso makes $33,810. The supreme leader of Afghanistan earns $36,030, and the prime minister of Lesotho makes $36,650. The prime minister of Bhutan earns $37,365, while in Nicaragua, the president takes home $38,360. The prime minister of Croatia earns $39,422, and the president of Bolivia receives $39,924. In Myanmar, the president earns $40,980, and the prime minister of Tonga makes $41,504. The president of the Central African Republic receives $42,524, while the president of Bosnia and Herzegovina earns $42,650. The prime minister of Belize makes $45,500, and in Thailand, the prime minister earns $46,000. The president of Mozambique takes home $46,800, while the president of Tanzania earns $47,300, the same as the president of Burundi. The president of Venezuela makes $48,860, and the president of Honduras earns $49,908. The prime minister of Bulgaria receives $50,000, while the prime minister of Lithuania earns $50,100. In St. Lucia, the prime minister makes $50,685, and the prime minister of St. Kitts and Nevis earns $50,844. The president of DR Congo takes home $51,500, while the president of Indonesia earns $51,600. The president of Argentina receives $51,840, while the prime minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines makes $55,724. The prime minister of Antigua and Barbuda earns $56,000, while in Peru, the president takes home $56,530. The prime minister of Malta makes $56,900, and the prime minister of Jamaica earns $57,545. In Poland, the prime minister earns $57,772, while the prime minister of Latvia makes $59,644. The president of South Sudan receives $60,000, the same as the president of the Marshall Islands. The prime minister of Romania earns $61,296, while the prime minister of Malaysia makes $61,044. The president of El Salvador earns $62,172, and the president of Zambia takes home $63,100. In the Gambia, the president earns $65,000, the same as the president of Gabon. The prime minister of India makes $66,000, while the president of Mexico earns $67,903. The interim president of Mali receives $68,900, while the president of Nigeria earns $69,000. The president of Algeria makes $70,000, and the president of Egypt earns $70,400. The prime minister of Slovakia receives $70,973, while the prime minister of Portugal earns $72,352. In Andorra, the prime minister makes $73,603, while the president of Malawi earns $74,300. The president of Nauru takes home $74,411, and the prime minister of Estonia makes $74,595. The president of Ecuador earns $75,132, while the president of Ghana receives $76,000. In Maldives, the president earns $77,768, while the prime minister of Samoa makes $78,000. The prime minister of Greece earns $82,405, and the captain regent of San Marino makes $83,682. The president of Panama receives $84,000, while the president of Rwanda earns $85,000. The prime minister of Trinidad and Tobago takes home $85,600, while the prime minister of Bahamas earns $86,000. In Slovenia, the prime minister makes $87,808, and the president of Palau earns $90,000, the same as the president of Liberia. The president of Cyprus receives $90,025, while the prime minister of Georgia earns $90,890. The president of Guyana makes $91,700, while in the Philippines, the president takes home $95,554. The prime minister of Iraq earns $96,000, and the prime minister of Spain makes $97,926. The president of Namibia earns $99,241, while the president of Botswana takes home $99,950. The president of Ivory Coast receives $100,000, while the president of Brazil earns $102,524. The president of Paraguay makes $103,044, while the interim prime minister of Libya earns $105,000. The prime minister of Barbados receives $106,667, while the prime minister of Papua New Guinea earns $107,532. The president of the Republic of Congo takes home $108,400, and in Azerbaijan, the president earns $110,000. The prime minister of Fiji makes $113,495, while the president of Costa Rica earns $113,520. The prime minister of Hungary receives $115,206, and the president of Comoros earns $117,650. The president of Palestine and the president of the Dominican Republic both earn $120,000. The prime minister of the Czech Republic takes home $120,702, while the prime minister of Italy earns $131,608. In Suriname, the president makes $133,560, while the president of Colombia earns $134,676. The president of Russia takes home $136,000, while the president of Uruguay earns $139,608. The prime minister of Lebanon receives $141,900, while the president of Zimbabwe earns $140,590. The president of Equatorial Guinea makes $152,680, while the prime minister of Finland earns $163,906. The prime minister of Somalia and the prime minister of Israel both earn $175,000. The president of Guatemala takes home $178,608, while the president of Uganda earns $183,216. The Prime Minister of Mauritius receives $187,968, while the President of Kenya earns $192,200. The Prime Minister of the Netherlands makes $193,844, while the President of France takes home $194,300. The President of Chile earns $196,000, while the President of Turkey receives $197,400. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom earns $198,307, while the Prime Minister of Norway takes home $210,740. In South Korea, the President earns $211,320, while the President of South Africa makes $223,500. The Prime Minister of Belgium earns $230,000, while the Taoiseach of Ireland makes $237,000. The Prime Minister of Iceland receives $242,609, while the Prince Regnant of Liechtenstein earns $244,000. The Prime Minister of Sweden makes $244,650, while the Prime Minister of Denmark takes home $249,774. The Prime Minister of Luxembourg earns $278,000, while the Prime Minister of Canada makes $279,000. The President of Mauritania earns $300,000, while the Prime Minister of Japan takes home $360,521. The Prime Minister of New Zealand earns $325,546, while the Chancellor of Austria makes $338,094. The Chancellor of Germany earns $369,727, while the Prime Minister of Australia takes home $392,811. The President of the United States earns $400,000 annually, while the King of Morocco makes $488,604. The President of Switzerland takes home $507,000, while the President of Syria earns $576,000. The President of Cameroon makes $620,976, while the King of Jordan earns $847,457. The Prime Minister of Singapore earns $1.61 million. The Sultan of Oman receives $7.238 million. The King of Bahrain earns $22 million, while the Emir of Qatar takes home $36 million. The Ngwenyama of Eswatini earns $50 million, and the Sovereign Prince of Monaco receives $52.063 million. The Emir of Kuwait earns $165 million, and the Supreme Leader of North Korea makes $500 million. The Sultan of Brunei earns an astounding $2 billion, while the President of the United Arab Emirates receives $4.608 billion. Finally, the Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia earns an astronomical $9.6 billion. The salaries of the presidents of Togo and Madagascar are currently unknown. Thanks for watching the video.